You're welcome. So what day is today? Friday. So it's our Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting. And so we'll start by getting clear on what is our intention. So what is the purpose of this meeting? Who is it for? What can you expect? What are the benefits? Because this way you can be clear for yourself if this is the right place. It'd be like, you want to know. It would be sort of like I went to college briefly, and I didn't know what I was doing. So, and I didn't have a purpose. And so I was attending classes, but it didn't willy-nilly in a sense. And so that wasn't any good. And that's, we want to be clear that am I in the right place? Is this for me? Is this the right time? So as I often point out, the title of the meeting is, I believe, a very clear, albeit very succinct description of what this is about and, in a sense, who it's for. So to relax into health, wealth, and happiness is that we are what we're about here is about recognizing, discovering that already intrinsic within myself is that which I'm seeking: the fulfillment, the bliss, the peace, the contentment, the joy that already exists within me, that is already true, and that it doesn't need to be constructed. It doesn't need to be gotten, but it already exists. However, we don't just stop there. So that's many ways stop there. So one mistake that we can make is thinking that every offering out there that is vaguely or roughly in the same genre is, whether we call that spirituality, or we call it self actualization, or we call it self-help, or we call it by whatever name we call it, we can make the mistake of thinking, it's all kind of the same thing and it's all interchangeable. But actually, we want to get clear that it's not all the same, that each invitation is unique. There may be some overlap, but we want to be clear, is this the optimal invitation for me? So there are some invitations, some offerings out there where that's the end of the road. They just stop right there, and that's not bad. It's not wrong. I'm not saying that, but we want to be clear. Is that right for me? Do I want to just stop there? So that's the path of renunciation. That is that we say this world is an illusion. It is suffering, and my attachment and identification is the means by which I suffer. That any kind of investment in any kind of sensory perception is suffering. And so in that case, clearly the remedy is stop it, right? And so if we withdraw inward, so to speak, and into the formless, our formless nature, which is what's being pointed to here when I say that already intrinsic in the self, that which you are, the essential self, is the fulfillment of what it is that, in the totality of what it is that you most long for, summarized in this meeting's title by the words health, wealth, and happiness. So we relax into health, wealth, and happiness. And notice that's different than strive for health, wealth, and happiness. Go get health, wealth, and happiness. Work hard for health, wealth, and happiness. That's a different path. So that's another way that it's sometimes presented, is your health, wealth, and happiness is a material accomplishment. And the only way that you can have that experience of health, wealth, and happiness is if you have the material equivalent that gives you that experience. So that's the materialist view. And so that's many offers out there are about that. Only that, right? So many of the ways that, for example, law of attraction is presented is at this, we'll say, lower level of consciousness. Not that lower doesn't mean bad. It's just to be able to speak of it, to differentiate. We'll say it's a lower, denser vibration, and more differentiated. And at that level, it's all we can understand. It's a materialist perspective because it's a materialist state of consciousness. And so we view everything through the lens of materialism. And so those offers are attractive at that level of consciousness. We all have that level of consciousness within us, but some of us are hanging out there more than others. Okay, so not, again, it's not bad. Materialism is not bad. It's at least not here, not in this, not from this way of seeing, not in the what is being the invitation that's being extended through these meetings. We don't perceive that materialism is bad, but we do see that it's limited. So to the degree that we are frustrated, unhappy, discouraged, disappointed, depressed, anxious, and so forth, what's happening is that we're stuck at a materialist level of consciousness, and we're not recognizing the higher levels of consciousness that are also here. And so now we see that there's these two, so broadly, these two categories, okay, of how, of what is, of the general kind of offers out there. Some of them are for the renunciate. So some of those offers, they say, pure consciousness, just pure consciousness, pure consciousness, pure consciousness, pure, forget about everything else, forget about the world. It's all suffering. It's all illusion. Just stay with pure consciousness. Be silent as much as possible. Don't engage in the world because there's nothing there for you. Just withdraw, spend as many hours as you possibly can in silent meditation. Be the witness. So we're not here saying that's bad. We're just seeing that that's what's where there's a limitation there in many of the offers. That's the end of the line. On the other hand, there's this materialist camp, divorced from the realization of, from a higher level of consciousness. And that in that camp, the offers are all about, here's how you're going to achieve, here's how you're going to produce, here's how you're going to get, here's how you're going to attract. So now notice that actually we play a false game, many of us, where we say, oh, I should be a renunciate, and then we say, oh, but I should have those material things. Now we've got this conflict going on within us because we want things, we want our life to be better, we want our life to be easier, we want more pleasure, more bliss, more happiness, more ease, more grace expressed in our lives. But if we keep believing in this renunciate path, which is so, I point this out just because it's operating subconsciously in us. So this, remember that here in these meetings, this in and of itself is, it's not just information. You have to understand there is information, there's a level of information, but the information is in many ways of secondary importance. It's not unimportant, but it's of secondary importance. It only supports really what it is that's of greater importance. And that is the the seeing, the recognition. And that means that you are actively engaged in this process. So how can you be actively engaged? Simply be present. And how can you be present? There are various tricks that we can use. One that I mention frequently, particularly in the somatic meetings, which, you're invited, please attend, they're valuable. I know some people, they're like, that sounds weird. It's not in my, I don't know what to do with that. I won't attend. Okay, I guess I'm not doing a good enough job describing how it's valuable, but so I'll have to work on that. But that we want to see that slowing down is a trick. So what does that mean? If you're feeling like confused or uncomfortable or distracted or whatever, slow down. How can you slow down? Well, relax the breath. That will help. Relax the body. Now you might say, "Oh, I don't know how. My mind's a million miles an hour, and I can't breathe because I've got this condition or that condition, and so told me so, and I can't relax because I'm always uptight." And but look, when we do that, then we're putting the cart before the horse, and we don't get anywhere. But what I'm saying is, slow down. Don't believe that you can't. Don't believe the conditioning. Don't believe the narrative that is the narrative of frustration, the narrative of your life presently that you accept as truth is a narrative of a life that has too much suffering for your liking. So don't accept those limitations. Instead, challenge them, you see. So here we slow down, and then we simply notice, and the information, the words that are being said, they're pointing you to look at your experience, at your direct experience in particular ways. But if you're not actually looking, you don't get the benefit, not really. So just notice, am I really slowing down? Am I really participating? Am I really engaged, or am I just looking for entertainment? Or am I still believing that somehow there's a limitation that's preventing me from being able to access truth now? And just, my invitation to you, or the invitation that comes through me, is an invitation to question, to look and see, is that true? Is that who I am? And now, look, these two paths that I've described, the path of the renunciate, which is so much of spirituality, so much of it is so heavily influenced by that it's in there, it's in our conditioning subconsciously. We don't know that it's operating, but we're experiencing its operation as the frustration, as a limitation. So what I'm inviting you to do is to see, don't believe your mind when it tells you, oh, this doesn't apply to me, or I already understand this, or I've heard it before, so blah, 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 I'll tune out, or I agree or I disagree. Don't do that, because then you miss the opportunity. So what's available is receive, okay? Receive. Not from me. I mean, I want to be clear about that. And because, this person here is got all of his flaws and limitations. So it's not like, don't receive from me. Don't pay attention to this person. Don't pay attention to trying to emulate anything, but instead you pay attention, give your full attention to what it is that's being pointed out. That's all. It's not about any of the other things that we're afraid that it might be about. It's not a cult. It's not anything like that. you can let your guard down because there's nothing external here that is trying to be placed on you. Instead, there's simply an invitation to look for yourself and see that you're accepting an unnecessary burden. That's actually, I think you see, the real invitation is, in many ways, it's the inverse of how we misunderstand it and feel threatened by it or confused by it. So these two paths, renunciate, which I'm telling you is it's an enormous influence in most of spirituality, whether that's religious or non-religious. The influence is enormous, whether it's Western or Eastern or New Age or whatever. The enormous influence of that renunciate path. So there's a sense of withdrawal is the only truth, that the world is illusion and suffering or some big test, and that I just have to endure it. But then the materialist path, in the way we normally understand it, but at a lower level of consciousness and what's available to us, is that we understand that it's in contrast with spirituality, because spirituality is renunciation. Materialism is, it's like the antithesis of renunciation. Like, you're supposed to renounce the world. You're supposed to renounce materialism. So renunciation is the renouncing of materialism. So they seem to be opposite. And so we kind of ping pong, who am I? What do I want? I want all these things in the world. I want to have these fulfilling relationships. I want to have these fulfilling experiences. I want to express creatively. I want to feel good. I want to have meaning. I want to have purpose. All the things that get poo-pooed in the renunciate path, which are like, that's all illusion. That's the cause of your suffering. Let it go. See that you are none of those things. But then we're bouncing back and forth. We have one foot in one camp and one foot in the other camp, and we wonder, why am I so frustrated? Why don't I have a sense that I'm moving forward in any way? But moving forward is like a bad word in the renunciate path. There is no moving forward. Time and space are an illusion, existing in the now, which is eternal, that I am, formless awareness. So, like, moving forward, that's anti-spiritual. You see how but then we say, oh, but I hurt so much. I hurt so much. Now, I want to be clear though, the renunciate path is true and effective, sort of, just not for you. But in theory, and for some. So it's not wrong, it's not bad, but it's not the whole truth for you. And you know that, and it's plainly obvious because you hurt, you see, and the hurting bothers you. Because the renunciation is, I don't care about any of that, because that all comes and goes. Hurt comes and goes. So, but I'm formless awareness. Hurt doesn't touch me. So now look and see. This is true, and it's essential, actually. So you want to see that this is true. On the one hand, I'm saying it's limited, it's incomplete, and if we don't get clarity around this, then we have blinders on, and we accept false limitations that maintain unnecessary suffering. But I'm not saying that renunciate goal, or the focus of renunciation, is actually wrong or bad. I'm just saying it's one side of the coin. So necessary and true, but not absolutely true. So as a teaching aid, we need to see it as some distinct experience or perception, but then we don't want to stop there. And that's the point here, that what makes this invitation different from many, not necessarily all, but many invitations out there, is that we're not planting our flag in one camp or the other. We're not materialists. We're not anti-materialists. We're not renunciates. We're recognizing that there's a wholeness of being that doesn't require this false conflict. The conflict is false, you see. The conflict between materialism and renunciation, materialism and spirituality, that division and the arising conflict, the schism, is unnecessary, because that exists only, it does exist, but it exists at a lower level of consciousness than what is available to us. So now look right now in your own experience and see, as I said, it's essential to recognize that I am formless awareness. So we're not denying it. It is true, I am formless awareness. And notice that I am formless awareness is a higher level of consciousness than the usual normal state of consciousness at which you normally identify. So just observe that in your experience. And you want to see that I can, for one instant, I can notice that I am, and that being is prior to any form. So maybe that's even, rather than calling it formless awareness, because then you start looking for, wait, what's the form that's formless? You're looking for it. But instead, if we point out that it is prior to form, so now you don't have to be concerned about looking for what is formless. Instead, just notice that you are prior to form. All form arises in you as consciousness, as pure consciousness. Just notice as you just notice, I am aware of the senses, right? I am aware that I am hearing. I am aware that I am seeing. I am aware that I am tasting. I am aware that I am smelling. I am aware that I am touching. I'm aware of thinking, right? I'm aware of feeling. I'm aware of imagination. I'm aware of energy. So anything that I can name or differentiate from anything else, I'm aware of. Even including the sense of being. See, the sense of being is itself still differentiating. It's differentiated because the sense of being is not the sense of not being, neither is it not the sense of being, right? So it's differentiated. Now this seems subtle, maybe kind of bizarre, abstract, and overly intellectual, but it's an important point. And remember that the invitation is to look to your direct experience now and see what's being pointed to that's actually true, not to accept something. It's a very, very important point. That I'm not inviting you to accept something externally, some new philosophy or some new theory or some new religion. In a sense, you know, what we're looking at here is like successful living 101. And without this, none of the other things will work. With this, everything else will work, and you'll know with greater clarity whether you want it or not. And thereby you'll know what it does. So you'll know, is this worthwhile? Is this where I want to invest my time and energy? So you want to look right now to your direct experience and just see what's being pointed to, that there is a sense that I am. Just you have a sense that I exist, not just pure being, but something, someone, something that's differentiated from something else. I am, not you are, not it is, I am. And I is something that is. It's not pure being, it's something. Yeah, it might seem too abstract, but just notice it's a subtle sense. So even prior to that, and this is the point, even prior to that is pure being. And now we don't have a language that allows us, I don't have a language, we don't have a common language that I'm aware of, that you're aware of, that we can communicate in, that allows us to speak of pure being without this thing called reification, in which that sense of being something is inserted artificially. It's a function of our language. That's how our language works. So we don't have a good way of describing pure being, but you can just notice that who you are in its most fundamental sense is this which I'm pointing to, that is prior to all form, pure being, even before the sense of being someone, even before the sense of I am. Even prior to that subtle arising, there is simply pure awareness. And that you are that, not the you that's thinking I am that, but that you, it's obvious if you just observe your direct experience just for just a split second. Just notice in this one split second, prior to any sense of being something or someone, prior to any arising thought, prior to any arising sensation, prior to anything at all, I am. Not, again, language doesn't work here. So you just have it. It's like we have to kind of be patient with the process. But when I say I am, I mean, I guess this is why we need specialized vocabulary. But it's called by different names. They give names to it, right? I mean, their God is a name, spirit is a name, many names given. Pure being, pure consciousness. I mean, these are all names that are given, but so I guess it's useful in some sense to use those terms, but then we start to make, we reify them. So then it becomes this thing that we're aspiring to, rather than noticing what it's actually pointing to. Just so notice right now that prior to any arising phenomena, there is presence that you are, but it's not, there's no one there to claim it. There's no one there. There's not a witness separate from it to say that is my experience. It's too intimate, too immediate, too whole, too unified for that. So it's prior to everything. And notice that it's always here. It's who you are at your most fundamental nature. So the renunciates correctly identify the tremendous importance of this. I'm not denying they've correctly identified it. So we need to see that. It's essential. That's why I say that's step one. And without that, nothing else is going to work very well. Because if we don't have that fundamental basis, the foundation from which to engage in the inquiry, then there's going to be some distortion already in the system that's going to color and bias everything, and we won't see clearly. And we'll be thinking, oh, it means this. And we keep going further and further out on limbs, and we're wondering, why am I feeling so uncomfortable? Why is it so unstable out here? So we've got to come back to this fundamental recognition over and over and over and over and over again. And it's always the basis of the inquiry. Is step one to recognize pure being, pure consciousness, formless awareness, prior to any sense that I am. And to then even notice that, well, no, this is now moving into step two, which is to start to notice, because this is, remember, we're not just renunciates. Anybody who's still here in attendance, you are not a renunciate. Anybody, I mean, the truth is anybody who can even access this is not a renunciate. If you have any doubt, like you're using a device, you're paying bills, you're what's called a householder because you hold a house. You are not a renunciate, you live in this world. And so now, but here's the beauty is we just had, it's just out of ignorance. We have not particularly in the West, we don't have a good understanding. It's not even presented to us that there's this real possibility of a higher level of consciousness than that division between spirituality and materialism, or uh, non-materialism and materialism. Okay, it's not even presented to us. It's like pick your camp. Materialism, that's what most people are doing. You want to try that? Or you can be one of those weirdos spiritual people. That's your choice. We don't even know that there's a higher level. But here, this invitation is pointing out that there is a higher level, not better, just higher, like a higher vantage point, in which that division hasn't yet been made. So this is to recognize that, yes, we can perceive that polarization between the formless and the form. We can observe that at a higher level. So it doesn't disappear. We still observe it, but now we're observing it and we're not caught up in having to try and pick a camp, because that's not true for us. We're not in one camp or the other. You know that I'm not going to take a lot of time with it, but you know you're not a strict materialist either, because you've not been able to find the material solutions to your problems, right? And I'm not saying that there will not, of course, there are material manifestations of solutions. So I'm not saying that don't take, I'm not saying stop eating. I'm not saying stop, don't use money because that's a material product, or, don't live in a house, don't drive a car. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm not saying that you can't you do whatever you do. It's a very important point about this invitation is those other limitations that exist, for many other forms of spirituality where there are a lot of taboos, wherever you are, in whatever your camp is, and that it's okay. You get to keep that if it serves you. So like all religions are allowed because your religion could serve you, and it's something maybe that's a unique expression through your just through you, that is perfectly fine and beautiful. So all religions are welcome here. It's not a religious thing. This is not at all religious. It's not anti-religious. It's at a higher level. So, which does not mean that they're bad, please. Your religion, if it serves you, is wonderful. It's supportive. The same as eating is supportive. The same as, all of these things are supportive, because here we're looking at a higher level. So all of that is fine. It's not an obstacle, because we're at a higher level. At that level, all those things are obstacles because we're stuck at that level. But here we're at a higher level. It's a higher dimension. So instead of having to go around or navigate in these lower dimensions exclusively, here at a higher level, there's another dimension. So now, I can go over. I don't have to be concerned about this or that, because this is an integrated view. So step one is recognize I am formless awareness. You don't have to have that thought or that experience or sensation or whatever you think is necessary in a sustained way or even ever for this realization of step one. So don't make conditions for it. It's actually prior to the conditions. So the conditions don't matter. Don't believe any of the conditions, because in this one instant right now, just right now, notice prior to the arising of all of the conditions, prior to the next thought, prior to the next memory, prior to the whatever, for just this one split second, there's pure infinite allowing, pure infinite being, pure infinite potential, pure infinite aliveness. And it's like you can even start to perceive it as like this infinite field from which all of the phenomenal world arises, and you can observe it directly happening in your actual experience. It's not, this isn't some, I want to be clear, remember, this is an invitation for you to look and see the truth of what's being pointed to, not a philosophy. Don't take notes and developing my new cosmological view of how things are. What I'm pointing out here are laws of nature, the structure of nature. And but the value of it is not as a story or a theory or a philosophy or anything like that. The only value of it is because you can then follow the instruction, do what's pointed out, look to your own experience, and you can confirm for yourself because you see it. That's the magnificence in my view. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but I think this invitation is amazing, wonderful. I think it's like the best thing. That's why I share it. So you can look right now and see that I am formless awareness. Now, step 2 is you start to observe that from this formless awareness arises movement. There is spontaneously, seemingly spontaneous, but we look more closely and it becomes clearer that it's not actually spontaneous in the sense of being, I mean, maybe spontaneous is the correct word, but usually we think of spontaneous as being like random. But this is not random, actually. You look very closely and you start to see it's intentional. And so at this very subtle level where we're just sort of like peering from the field of infinite potential, of no, not non-local, non-temporal, infinite being, we're observing directly and seeing as creation starts to come forth. Because you have to understand, creation is happening now. Creation is not something that happened in the past. It's not something that will happen in the future. It's happening now. And the magnificent power of this, and we're getting to what the benefit of all of this is that you can begin to live your life from choice. And that it is the integrated fulfillment of your true desire. It's not pure materialism devoid of consciousness, and it's not pure consciousness devoid of materialism. It's the whole. It's the unified whole, the non-dual self, not a self, not a self, the self, the one without a second. So that, just kind of like paint the picture of how this plays out. I know I haven't really clarified step 3, which I will get to, but in terms of what this looks like, the benefits for you in your life, it's that this constant gnawing discomfort ceases to run your life, and instead you are awake and living. And you see from a higher level with total clarity that neither the formless nor the form are exist independent of one another, that they are a unified whole expressed in a polarity, and it is your direct experience. And as that gets clearer and clearer and clearer, this is a big promise. I'm not saying this is likely or necessarily will happen in a day, but this is the big promise, is that when applied persistently, this approach, this inquiry, this particular technique that I'm outlining in 3 steps today, this particular technique done correctly, as that's the caveat, because we can do it incorrectly a billion different ways and then some. So to do it correctly though, and consistently and persistently, with all those ingredients, the guaranteed outcome sooner or later, I'm not giving a fixed timeline to it, is that there really is a blossoming into a life of choice, and a permanent, or an eternal access, and to have your what's the word I'm looking for? Set point. You're like your consciousness set point, set at that level of bliss. Like I said, is a big promise, but, and I'm not saying that, I want to be really, really clear. It's very unlikely. Once you see how this is all working, which is available to you through this inquiry, once you start to see how nature is working, how it's structured, you'll see that you can greatly increase or let's say decrease the learning curve, so that you can have more success more quickly. But you also see that there's so much in this that's already built into the system in terms of your conditioning that is working against that. So this is why we need to be clear about what we want. It's why I emphasize it so much, because what happens, and this is all pointers on how to use the technique. Okay, so we get, step 1, maybe it takes a while before we have confidence in step 1. So if you have the wrong expectation that you attend one meeting and then I snap my fingers and then you're like, oh, that's what he's talking about. The big thing that people have been seeking for eternity, that almost nobody ever finds. Oh, that, okay, got it. This could happen, does sometimes happen, but if you expect that has to happen and then you're not having that experience and then you go away, well, you're only, I guess, in a sense, you're just hurting yourself. So you want to have the right expectation. I need to set the right expectation so that you can get the benefit, because that's sort of my job, is just to, as best as possible, give you all the information, the experience, the pointers, practical application tips and so forth, so that you can get the benefits, because I'm just saying the benefits are real. Here's how to get the benefits, and then here's how you might misunderstand it, or reasons why you might not be perceiving the benefits, or why you might give up on it. And so that's my job, is to help you, coach you through that as best I can. So, we have that realization eventually. And then we still have doubt. So, doubt, there's not a requirement that doubt has to go away, because all that the realization is, all it is, I mean, it's huge, it's everything, but it's all it is simply that I am prior to form. That's it. I am prior to form. And that's not hard. That's the easiest thing. It's the easiest thing. But then we get to step two. Once we're like, okay, maybe kind of sense that I am formless awareness. Maybe kind of have some, not so sure, but kind of, maybe I think I'm getting some clarity on that. Okay, great. That's it. So then it's like Rome wasn't built in a day. So don't have the wrong expectation. You'll be better off. Step two, then you say, okay, now I'm starting to just notice that movement is happening. Yes, starting to just notice there's movement, there's sensation, thought, all kinds of experience happening. So I'm noticing there's movement, there's activity, there's energy. I'm noticing that. But if we're not clear on what we actually want, then we're not actually recognizing who we are. Because, and there's a big denial of this in some camps. There's a denial that will or desire or intention is a very high level quality of what we could classify as the divine, the highest level. So they're poo-pooed and frowned upon because that's the renunciate camp. They're like, oh, no, desire is dangerous. Intention is dangerous. No, that's of the world. Give no attention to that. But what makes this invitation different is that we're actually saying, why do you need to work so hard to keep all of that so-called dangerous phenomena away? Are you so sure that it's evil? Are you so sure that it's suffering? Have you really exhaustively determined that that's so? And let's just take a look. And then we just start to ask, well, you still seeking? Okay, I have to admit I am. You still afraid? I kind of have to admit I am. You still envious? Well, a little bit. You got any resentments? Kind of few. Regrets? Kind of. Okay. Well, guess what, buddy? You've got intention. You've got desire. You have preference. Now, that renunciate path, which is not bad, but it has limitations, that renunciate path just says, just withdraw more, withdraw, pay no attention to it, pay no attention to it. That's just suffering. Don't give any attention to it. It's not you, it's not you, it's not you. But, which is all useful and valid. But then when the phenomena is still arising, we begin to make effort to what? To not see it, to not experience, to not perceive it. We're like those monkeys, because we say, that's suffering. I can't go there. Can't, Whoa, hold on. Doesn't that seem a whole lot like something called trauma? I mean, think about it. What happens, it's like somebody has post-traumatic stress disorder and everybody's like, oh, okay, go easy on Johnny. He's got PTSD. Don't, sometimes he gets a little unsettled. Don't provoke him because he might really wig out, poor guy. He, back in Nam, nothing we can do about it. And but that's, in a sense, we do that when we're refusing to acknowledge or see that we have desire and intention, and this is the important part that really makes it work, that it is good and that it is of the divine, it is of the self, not myself or a self, of the self, of the divine, of that highest level. So like above that level, there is no greater authority. This is the highest level authority. But what we notice in that position, we're playing God, right? We're saying, God must have made a mistake here, right? God must have made a mistake because I have this desire, but it shouldn't be happening. I have intention, but it shouldn't be happening. I have preference, but it shouldn't be happening. It's no good. It's bad, 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 bad. God must have made a mistake. Now, that's not bad, but it is limited, obviously. And when we're limited by that conditioning and we just accept that, then what we do is we prevent the fulfillment of our desire. Do you see that's what's going on? We're working hard unconsciously all the time to prevent the expression of our true desire. So all we're doing is we stay stuck at this level where it's unfulfilling because we're supposed to, it's like we have a desire to express, materially. That's why this is happening, not because God made a mistake. It's like, oh my God, you really screwed up on this one. Why did you make this? This world of suffering. What's that all about? But no, look at it differently. From a higher level, God didn't make a mistake. What you are experiencing is simply the feedback mechanism. It's like, don't do that. You don't want that. Don't do that. That's not who you are. Don't do that. How do you know? Because it hurts. Every time you do it, it hurts. Why? Because you're like, it's the wrong thing. So we have to get clear on what do I want, and to realize that what we really want is not bad at all. What we really want is just simply to be ourselves, and that is perfect. But all of these fears arise. I call these the gatekeepers, right? Because these fears arise as we're inquiring into what do I really want? Who am I really? What's true? And when we start to when we start to look at it in this way, we start to open up into the lightness of being. Okay, so at a higher level of consciousness, the air is fresher, cleaner. We breathe easier. We don't feel so burdened and weighed down. We don't feel so paranoid and so worried. We feel lighter. So the lightness of being is the experience of that transcendence of consciousness to a higher level. When we experience this lightness of being, then what we're directly tapped into is our calibration system in terms of how, it's what helps us to be present and choose what is true moment to moment. When you notice this lightness of being, which I'm inviting you to do right now, how do you know when you're experiencing the lightness of being? Because you just feel lighter. Allow yourself that right now. Just let yourself be lighter, and you'll be surprised. It's not as hard as you think. In fact, it's less hard than what you're usually doing. So it's not some really difficult thing. It's the easiest thing. It's just to allow yourself to lighten up just for a moment. You don't have to do it forever. I mean, you'd like to, and the promise is that that's possible. but you don't have to do it forever. It does itself, and you simply open to it. So that's the process, is that we have to blossom. We have to allow that. But this feedback is coming through the lightness of being. It's like, what do you want? And you're like, oh, lightness of being. How do you know? Because it feels good, doesn't it? Relative to what you're accustomed to, just for a moment to open to something lighter. You don't have to aspire necessarily to the very highest, but just a little higher, a little lighter, just a little lighter than what you've been doing. Like, you didn't know that you were doing it, but you were clamping down all of that burden that you've been feeling, all of the heaviness, all of the, you were doing that. You just didn't know. None of us know, but we can a little bit open to something, doing less, open to the lightness of being. It gives you a direction in which to begin to inquire into your direct experience. You just start to notice, oh, that's a little better. Oh, that's lighter. Just a little bit. You just start to notice that, and then you start to notice, oh, this is how I can live my life. In so many respects, like, this is available all the time. You just have to learn how to stop doing what you're accustomed to doing, which is why you have to get clear on what you want, because the habit of what you normally do is very well established. And there's another force in nature, which I've been calling entropy, that is working to, or it's sort of like gravity in a way. You know, we all have the experience of gravity. That gravity is a force that brings things in our earthly experience. It brings it to the earth. You throw something up, it comes down. So that's why we say what goes up must come down, because of gravity. But there are other forces that are operating. It's not just gravity. Other forces are operating, and if it goes up high enough, it escapes the gravitational force, or it begins to become under the influences of other forces to a greater degree. So, but we have to get enough outside of that force of gravity. So in terms of our own experience, so if we understand that gravity is a material equivalent of something that has subtler equivalents in our experience, we can start to notice how that's playing out in terms of the lightness of being. So there's the light. You can open just for like that to the lightness of being a little bit, just a little lighter, just a little bit. You just stop doing that thing that you don't need to do, for whether it's giving attention to thought, or squeezing your lower back, or clenching your jaw, or for whatever it is, just for a moment, just for an instant, just stop doing that and notice that you feel lighter. So you can notice that that's possible. Like, that's like throwing this rock up in the air for a moment. You hit, there's a moment at which, see, there's a force of being thrown up, and then there's a moment at which there's absolute weightlessness. This is true in physics. There's a moment of absolute weightlessness. Once that force that's working in opposition to gravity, it is countered equally by the force of gravity. There's this one instant in which they cancel one another out, and that rock is weightless, strange as it might seem. But we know that that's true, because at that very instant, if that rock was right above your head at that very instant, it wouldn't hurt, right? But if it hit you when you're on ground level, it will hurt, because you're experiencing that weight. So at that moment of weightlessness, that's the moment at which those two forces equal but oppose one another. And now in our own experience, what we're dealing with is this force of gravity or entropy that is bringing everything back to the status quo. Because we're all, we're all in this together. This is all one, obviously one happening. So there has to be cohesion. We're this creation here, this is a group creation in a sense, right? Like I'm, you know, this individuation is a is an influence, and your individuation is an influence. So this is a group project, you know, collaborative art project, or whatever you, however you want to understand it. So this force of gravity is bringing everything back to this sort of collective field of human consciousness, which is human consciousness overall, not such a high level. It's been a lower level, obviously, and there are lower levels of it manifesting, but kind of not that high of a level at present. So that's where we're getting drawn back to. That's that force of gravity bringing us back to that. But we have the ability, and it comes because it is the power of intention. Okay. So when you know what you want, then you're aware that there's this other, you know, gravity's working, bringing you that way, but you know, what I want is that. So you look at what's true more or less collectively for humanity, and you see, do I want that? You know, a lot of fear, right? Do you want a lot of fear in your life? A lot of violence? Do you want a lot of violence in your life? A lot of competition in a like, you know, cutthroat way? Do you want that? So you see, okay, no, I don't want those things. Okay, but if you're not clear then on what you do want, then there's nothing really opposing gravity. In other words, you're going to stay with the rest of the herd. You're going to stay with the rest of humanity. As humanity changes, you will change in that respect, but you're not going to change otherwise. You're only changing with the herd. Well, safety in numbers, but also you can all go over the cliff. So you've got to have some people, preferably a lot of them, who are capable and willing to be clear on what they want, trusting that it is divine, that it is from a higher level of consciousness, and that it is good. Because look at how this happens. You want peace, don't you? Of course you do. You couldn't be here if you didn't want peace. So, but you might say, well, doesn't everybody? Clearly not. At a higher level of consciousness, of course, everybody wants peace because we are that. But at a lower level of consciousness, at the current level of consciousness of humanity, clearly peace is not what's wanted. Because other things are more important, according to collective humanity. And we can all point and blame and say, oh, it's all over there, it's all those people. And what can I do? But I'll tell you what you can do is you choose boldly. And as you choose and I choose and enough people choose, what starts to happen is there's a shift, like, you know, 100th monkey effect. The certain threshold is crossed, and there's, because of the power of intention, once there's just takes a small number, really. I mean, there have been you know, like the TM organization, for all their flaws, maybe they've done some cool stuff, and you can write it off as whatever from a cynical mind, but you let it in as a, like, in a, from a higher level of consciousness, and it's just like, wow, that's amazing, that's hopeful, that's exciting, we can do something. They, you know, they've shown, if we get 4,000 TM meditators in some location, and we're going to have them perform this meditation, see, collectively with an intention, And we're going to measure what are the outcomes of that in terms of, they'll look at crime rates, things of that nature. And they find there's a reduction in the things that, if they're meditating for peace, they see there's a reduction in violent crime, measurable reduction in violent crime. And, they can sustain it. There's a certain effect that can be sustained because there was enough intention, and it was energized enough. So when we all have this common intention and we all are taking active steps to be engaged in this process to manifest that intention, then it has very powerful effects, and we all benefit. All, like everybody in humanity and everybody affected by humanity, all of us, you and me included, we all benefit when the level of consciousness of humanity is at a higher frequency, because there's more, like all the burdens that we take on, all the struggles, all of the, the things that we accept, we accept that, some people are just, beyond hope, and, everybody's a little depressed, and everybody's a little anxious, and it's just how, that's how it is. And, I push my buttons enough, and I guess I'll also go, postal. And we accept that because that's the lower frequency that humanity as a whole collectively vibrates at. So imagine what it could be like if all of the things that we just accept and take for granted that are weighing us all down, fear, anxiety, depression, hopelessness, like all the things that are weighing us all down, no matter who we are, no matter how enlightened we are, it's weighing all of us down as a collective, as a humanity. Imagine if those were lifted, because there's a lightness, and it starts with you. That's the amazing thing about this. You want to make change, it starts with you. It's like its own, in a sense, it starts and ends with you. Your sense of who you are expands. So step 2 is you start to get clear that there is intention, there is desire, and that it is good, and it can be described as unconditional love, or unconditional peace, unconditional happiness, unconditional joy, unconditional beauty, like all the most wonderful things that we can imagine, because they are expressions of the lightness of being. So we start to notice that, and we start to recognize that, yes, that's true. I feel good when I allow these things, and I allow my attention to remain with that. And the other habits come, but I'm not so interested in them now. They're not so attractive. So these are the gatekeepers. Those habits are the habits that keep bringing back to what's normal, what's average, keep coming back to the baseline, keep coming back to the set point. That's the habits, it's the conditioning. And the gatekeepers, whether you know it consciously or not, you installed them because you said, I'm putting everything in with humanity. So I'm going to be like them. I'm going to do what they do. You don't remember it, but that's what we've all done. We all did that. It was trade-off. It's part of growing up. In order to survive in this society to some degree, you have to be in with humanity. You gotta be like, all right, humanity, if that's where we're going, I'm going there with you, because I can't stray too much if I'm going to still be human. But holy cow, that's a weird direction sometimes. So it's up to us to be clear that, no, I'm not going back. I understand that I put you here, gatekeeper, because I said I'm going all in with humanity, but and your job is to scare me. Your job is to say, turn back, danger ahead, so scary, don't go there. That's the gatekeeper's job, to maintain the status quo. But we have to be clear, knowing I'm going into the jungle, and I just put the gatekeepers all along the way, and they're going to leap out on the path, and they're going to be so terrifying. I'm going to want to, poop my pants and run. But I'm clear on what I want. I want unconditional peace more than I want not to be afraid. You see, I want unconditional peace more than I want not to experience pain. And you say, wait a second, now this sounds a little wicked. What are you saying? I'm saying you have those things, you have those experiences because you rehearse them. I have the experiences I have because I rehearse them. They're habits, but the rehearsal is unconscious. The moment that you challenge it, you are met with the gatekeepers, and they're going to scream at you to scare you and terrify you to go back to the status quo, because they're going to say, wait a second, no, don't go. And eventually it's like, this is the point of no return. And you think it's not going to pull out all the stops? Oh, yes, it will. It's going to, because you're really pushing the limits now. It's got to test you. Are you sure you want unconditional peace? Because, and it's going to tell you whatever's going to scare the bejesus out of you. It's going to say, if you're really serious about this, and if you don't open your eyes right this second and get out there and do something, then you are going to be the cause of endless torture of all of humanity, of all beings everywhere. It's going to, whatever is going to get your attention, it will do it. Because you got to be clear, even and especially at that point. I want unconditional peace. You have to be clear, and it can't be mindless, but you've got to actually be present and stare the gatekeeper in the face and let it in, because it's here for you. It's not against you. It's here for you. It's here because it's saying, in order for this to actually work, like this gate cannot be unlocked, but by one thing, and one thing only, and that is the crystal clarity that this is what is true. You see, when you have that crystal clarity that what is true is unconditional peace, it's only then that the gate can open and there can actually be the manifest experience of that. Up until that moment, there's resistance that keeps working against you. That gravity just keeps pulling you back to the baseline. So you have to be clear, 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 and clearer still. And that's why step one, as usual, lately I'm going over, but this all seems so important to be clear about, because I want you to get the optimal results. So you have to know, okay, look, I'm in, whatever the problem is, I'm in the habit of this, right? Whatever the depression, the anxiety, the worry, the brain fog, the pain, the suffering by a million different names. I'm in the habit of it. Now, just to see that, just to really like accept that invitation to see how that's true, notice how that challenges the status quo. So the status quo of humanity says, stay numb, keep your head down, don't look up. So just to even say, actually take a look, is threatening to the status quo. So at every step along the way, we're met with the gatekeepers. but they're our allies. They're not our enemies. They are our allies because they are saying, look, I actually am here to teach you. If you just look into my eyes, it says, just look into my eyes. And you're like, oh my God, I don't think I can do it. It's too scary, too scary. I can't look into your eyes. I can kind of look around them, but I can't look at them. And it says, look in my eyes, because in my eyes is the answer. Receive the answer and you have the key and the door unlocks and then you step through. But you're like, oh, I don't know. I'm afraid if I look into your eyes, I might lose my soul. You know, that's what I'm talking about. That's the level of intensity that is met in the gatekeeper, is that primal fear of extinction, of losing yourself, because you've invested an enormous amount into it, right? And that's why I'm saying this is not, we don't stop here just at the, we're not, it's not about just kill the ego or any of that kind of stuff. That's renunciate stuff. This is about recognize what is prior to the ego. Recognize what is prior to this experience. Notice that you are that, step one. Step two, notice that simultaneous, there is a movement. The movement doesn't harm the purity of formless awareness, so there's no problem. It's a movement, but here at this subtle level, I start to notice this movement I like, that movement I don't like. And there's a mistrust of it because we're afraid to move beyond this, because to move beyond this means to actually start to live from choice. But we're afraid, oh, no, that the taboo of looking up is very strong. So we say, no, I don't think I can do that. And then the gatekeeper saying, look me in the eyes. And you say, oh, no, I'm too afraid. And like, well, it says, well, what are you afraid of? And you're like, well, you might eat me. It's like, oh, I won't eat you. And you're like, oh, but you might steal my children. Like, no, I won't do that. You just like can't look it in the eyes. But if you continue with this process, you see what's happening now. Step three is you begin to imagine your life as an expression of what is true here at the most basic level of individuation, where you are something, meaning there's something you're not. There's an individuation. So there is a refinement of what this is. And if we can't move beyond a very basic level of just the clarity of, do I want this or that? It can't evolve. So we have to get clear, what do I want? And then imagine that, so I give a term to it, unconditional peace, because that points to kind of what it is that's most true, right? Because at a fundamental level, very fundamental level, we can say, we're choosing security or insecurity. Which do you want? Now, at a fully transcendent level, security and insecurity are both one and the same. There's no separation. But in expression, this is why it's not a path of pure renunciation. This is a path of expression of the householder, of waking into the dream. And so we have to choose. It's like you're not doing something, you are doing something else. You're for it or you're against it. You can't be on the fence. So you have to get clear. What do I want? Security or insecurity? What do I want? You're like, oh my goodness, security. But then look, then all the conditioning working against you. It's like, there's no such thing as security. Nobody has security. And God, there's all these things to be afraid of, and you can't do anything about any of those things. So I guess all the justification working against you to keep you back here at the status quo of like, I can't choose. I really want security, but oh my God, I guess I got to choose insecurity. And so we have to choose and recognize that what I truly desire is unconditional peace. What that's actually pointing to, not the words, but the actuality of that. And see, now you're tested. Stay true to it. You just stay true. Keep imagining that this is expressing, this unconditional peace, this lightness of being is expressing, it's expressing as you. Well, now, of course, you start to be met with even more fears and doubts, and like, oh, but I couldn't, and they say I can't, and nobody can, and just you settle for what settle, set your sights low, and all this. It's like, wait a second, look up, and you start to see, oh, okay, this is available to me, something higher, where I'm not mired in all of that stuff, where I'm clear what I want. I want unconditional peace. All this other stuff that comes along, I have to just, measure it against that. It's like, am I going to put more energy into the resistance so I can get back to the status quo that I really don't want? Or am I going to look and get clearer? What is this unconditional peace? Let me look again. Oh, yes, this unconditional peace that I want, it can't be opposed by that thing. That thing's too small. That thing's not so true. Unconditional peace, more important than fear. Unconditional peace, more important than pain. Unconditional peace, more important than approval. Unconditional peace, more important than my bank account number. You get clearer, clearer, clearer. And then, but it doesn't stop there. It continues, because we're expressing something that's continuing to individuate and become ever more refined. And that experience, experienced at a lower level, it can be terrible. It could be wonderful, but it could be terrible. But experienced at a higher level, it's pure pleasure. That's the promise. It's the big promise. I'm not saying, I'm not saying that I'm a perfected being who's arrived there at that, but I'm saying that's the big promise. And I can tell you, it's like, so imagine you're taking a journey, okay, and on that journey you haven't arrived at somewhere, but you see it, it, you're like, it's there, it's real. I'm not gonna get there. I mean, there's such things as mirages, but you also, if you have a guide with you who's like, see, there it is. Like, I can describe every detail of it to you. As it comes into view, you'll see it more clearly. So that's in, like, I'm sort of like a guide in that sense, that I can point. I'm like, look, I understand it. I've walked this path, and I know you're afraid, and here are the doubts that you're having, and here's why you're about to give up and run away. But look, I know your cynical mind and suspicious mind is telling you this guy is just another wheeler and dealer, and he's just here, he's going to waylay me. He's once I get over that, into that little valley where nobody can see him, he's going to club me and take all my stuff and whatever. These fears surface, but I'm just saying, look, hold on. Here, others have pointed to it, others who are trustworthy, right? Those who are trustworthy for me, Ramana Maharshi, Shiva Premanandaji, Yogananda, others, who they are my guides and trustworthy for me, because they've been reliable, absolutely trustworthy. And they've demonstrated things that prove it to me adequately. But they are extending an invitation, and I'm extending that invitation, and I'm just saying, look, they've walked the path. I've walked the path to this point. Here's the territory. See it. Here's what the landmarks that you encounter. Here's how, I'm telling you, there's a destination that is worthy of the journey, worthy of this. And of course, along the way, because there's this thing working to keep us with humanity at the average of humanity, rather than on the, event horizon, rather than being, way out there where it's sort of maybe dangerous, but they're like, look, we need more, we need more, we need more here, because this is the fulfillment. This is the fulfillment of the human life. Everybody's wanting to know what it is, where it is, here it is. This is the fulfillment. And take this path. This is the best path. This is the most efficient path. This will get you there. And 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 along the way, what happens is that the journey is transformed into the destination itself. Like the destination and the journey are revealed to be one and the same. It's not like, but at first it's got to be, we've got, the city of gold. We're all going for the city of gold. We've got to do that. But that was all, in some sense, it's a ploy for what's greater, that is beyond our imagination, because we're not perceiving from the event horizon that they're telling us about. But when we perceive from the event horizon, then we see what is possible, and we see that it is good. It is nothing suspect or bad about it at all. It is purely wonderful and good for everyone. It's like when you really inquire adequately, you discover that there is nothing, there's nothing bad about unconditional peace for anyone. It's not about, taking from some to give to others, and there's nothing about it. It's simply unconditional peace. Everybody benefits from unconditional peace. So when we start to, get more refined clarity on what we want, then what happens is we're closing the gap so that our ability to manifest with clarity becomes so much more powerful. We couldn't be trusted with that before because we hesitated, we didn't know, we were uncertain. But as we go through this process of this simple 3-step inquiry over and over and over and over and over and over. So anytime that you experience suffering of any kind, however you deem it, anything that you don't want, that you feel stymied by, you like, there may be things that you want, but you're like, yeah, I know how I could do that, but I don't really want it that much. But there are some things that you want very much. They're so important to you, but you don't know how to get them. You don't know how to achieve them. Like you want to have that, you want to improve that relationship. You want to have better, develop some skill more. You want some, so you have some aspiration, some vision. You want to be able to manifest it, but you just say, I don't know how. I guess it's not possible. You go back to the baseline of, set point for humanity, which is, they're going to say, everybody will just say, yeah, nobody knows. We're all just got to suffer together. That's baseline of humanity. But here, you're opening to, you're taking this journey to discover what's possible and what's good. Unconditional peace. Everybody benefits. Everybody. You benefit, your loved ones benefit, even your enemies benefit. Even those you can't even think of benefit. Everybody benefits. Everyone. So 3 steps is just, anytime you notice that you're suffering, big or small, best if it's small because it's easier to apply. But anytime you notice you're suffering, pause. Step 1, just for an instant. This is like 1 second, 2 seconds for this first step. You just notice, I am, prior to all arising, I am pure awareness. Just notice it. That's it. But you just notice that it's true. You notice what that's pointing to, that for 1 instant, you can realize this formless awareness that is eternally present. Step two is you start to then also notice that there's movement, that this movement is felt as desirable or undesirable. I like it or I don't like it. But here we're at a very, very, very subtle level, very subtle level. So it's murky, but you just start to notice, oh, that direction, this direction. One of them is familiar and the other one is what's good. There's the familiar and there's what's good. So the familiar is, we tend to go into the familiar, but you can just start to feel like what's good, and you start to open to the lightness of being, just a little bit of lightness relative to where you were. Just let things lighten up and notice that that's better. You like it better. You prefer the lightness of being. So this is good. Now, who wouldn't want the lightness of being? Does it hurt anyone if everybody is experiencing the lightness of being? Might we actually all benefit if everybody was lighter? Like, couldn't that, if everybody was experiencing more of the lightness of being, wouldn't that be unconditional peace manifest? So here it's like lightness of being, unconditional peace. It's like, oh, this feels good. I like it. So step two, it's just like that. It's just, you don't dwell on it, just a few seconds, 5, 10 seconds, whatever. And you just notice, yeah, I like it. So you're starting to get more comfortable accepting this natural lightness of being, which there's force working against it. It's habit. So step three then is you just imagine this lightness of being expressing in your life, and you'll just notice how the habits start to show, how you're believing what's opposite to that. You're believing, well, I can't, and it's hard, and nobody else can do it, and it's not even real anyway, and I'm probably, this will disappear and then I'll be suffering again, so what's the point? And all this stuff that's working against, but you just be present to that and just know, be clear on what you want. I want the lightness of being. So even though all of these fears and doubts and memories and justifications are showing up, I just choose to remain present and open to what's possible, that there is something beyond what I'm presently seeing, obviously, because it happens all the time that things come into my consciousness. Might I want to be more conscious of what I want and have more ability to navigate with confidence my own experience so that I can actually manifest with confidence what I desire? I'm not talking about fancy cars necessarily. I mean, maybe that too, but what do you really want? And you get so clear on that, and then, boy, that's a good thing. So that's what's possible. That's what's possible for you. And these 3 steps are how to, something you can do to apply yourself to get results. I know we went really, really, really over, but I hope I made that very clear, because it's very, very positive message about what the problem is and how you can actually do something. So you have the ability to live from choice and to know that your choice is good. So I'll leave it at that for the formal portion, and then we'll go to the Q&A for those who are here live.